Welcome to the Head Shepherd Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Ferguson, CEO at Next and Agri International, where we help livestock managers get the best out of their stock. Before we get started, a big thanks to our three fantastic sponsors. Allflex, part of MSD, perhaps better known as Cooper's Animal Health in Australia, offers one of New Zealand and Australia's largest livestock product portfolios with a comprehensive suite of animal health and management products. Heineken is a one-stop shop for wool harvesting and animal fibre removal. The Heineken team have a deep understanding of livestock agriculture, backed by Swiss engineering and a family business dedicated to manufacturing the best. ProA Livestock Equipment have been delivering industry-leading livestock handling systems to producers across Australia, New Zealand and beyond for the last 25 years to improve on-farm safety, efficiency and profitability. We are grateful to our sponsors for their support, helping us bring Head Shepherd to you each week. And now it's time to get on with this week's episode. Welcome back to Head Shepherd. Thanks very much for listening along. This week on the show, we have Allan Richardson from Allan Genetics. We talk all things worm resistance, worm resilience, short tails, selecting against dags, organic farming, a whole range of things that Allan's into. He's been organic for a long time now and has bred a sheep appropriate with that requires minimal chemical intervention. We've had a few different examples of breeders that are doing this, and great to have Allan on the show. Just a quick update on the 26 2000 before we get into chatting around Allan. Just clocked out the 300 kilometres on my 2,000k journey. Most of that's been running and a bit of walking, or probably nearly 100 k's of walking, I'm thinking, can't remember now, and then a bit of time on the erg as well. Awesome to see all the others out there doing it. I know my brother's Tim flogging me. He's out well in front. My other brother's doing heaps of k's on the bike, and then heaps of mates and lots of people across the globe actually participating, which is fantastic to see. We're all running for the Cure Brain Cancer Foundation, and we're all for that very good cause. Thanks, a huge thanks to those people out there who've already donated towards that cause. The tally's getting up 7 or 8 grand now. We're trying to get 52,000, which is 2,000 times 26. If you're wondering how I did that math or why we came up with the number 52,000, it's all trying to generate money for research for brain cancer, and we'd love any support out there. Anyone who's joined in and hasn't let us know, please let me know. We love hearing the stories of people out there that are clocking out the Ks. Sometimes it's a challenge to get those times in, but we're getting it done. Right, we'll get underway with this week's show with Allan Richardson. Allan, you're farming down in the south, just where are we? Inland from Dunedin, sort of thing. Is that the best way to describe where you're at?
Yeah, probably. Look, we're a fast hour and a half directly inland from Dunedin. We're half an hour north of Gore, half an hour south of Roxburgh. So we're on that interface between a Southland and a Central Target climate up in the hills, if that makes sense. So
excellent. We'll start with you just rounding out a quarter of a century of being certified organic. So maybe talk us through a bit about that journey. How I guess your farming system and that transition to organic.
Yeah, look, I've been farming for the thick end of 40 years, and just under 30 of those have been farming organically. We're in a climate which is, we normally get pretty good summer rainfall, so we're pretty much a Southland climate, grow grass in the summer and autumn, and hopefully get it grow enough to get through the winter and spring. But what's been happening lately is that our cold winters have sort of translocated into cold springs, and the last 3 or 4 years we've had big snowfall events in September and October. We're not getting them over the winter time, so that September and October is when we lamb and calve, so it's putting a bit of pressure on our system, that's for sure. So been farming organically for the last 30 odd years, probably introducing regen principles since about 2017, 2018. And it's both those things work pretty well together. The organics is important to us. It's a passion. I don't think any farm system, if you're not on board with it, it's not going to work for you. And it's a bit like a sheep breed, isn't it? If you don't like the sheep, you're probably never going to reach the ultimate with that breed.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess that's what we'll spend most of our time talking about is the breeding, and I guess being organic forced you down a line of obviously low or zero chemical use. So that means the sheep's got to do a lot of the heavy lifting. So we'll talk through that. Before we get into that, we might just cover off on, I guess, the full farming system there. You've one thing that a few farmers have got their head around is equity partnership. One of your blocks, you've done an equity partnership to let give someone else an opportunity to land ownership.
Yes, we have, Ferg. Look, we farm 800 hectares ourselves, but we've got a second property of 500 hectares. And the last 7 years, we've had an equity partner on that 500 hectares. That property was organic. It's transitioned back to conventional because our equity partner is more comfortable in a high input situation. We reckon he could make more money out of it doing it that way. That's fine. Took a wee while to get my head around that. But it's at the end of the day, we want to put a young family on a farm that wouldn't otherwise get there. And just a wee bit of my history, I'm a second-generation farmer, but my father put 3 people onto farms during his career. And so, I think that I had a much easier start to farming than my father, and it's part of the legacy to perhaps continue that and see a good farming couple progress to having their own farm.
For those who don't understand what that means, I guess, or young people out there looking for such an opportunity, can you give us a little bit of detail? Obviously, don't want to get into specifics or personal details, but how you've sort of structured that to make that work for both parties?
Yeah, look, Scott and Kirsty were people that we didn't know. We were introduced to them through our banker at Rabobank, and they initially came to work for us, and just to make sure that both parties could get on with each other. And what the equity partnership really is that they're effectively buying into your business. So they're buying a percentage share, and each one is different. But for our one, it was a percentage share of land and buildings. A few years down the track, we also leased the stock, allowed them to buy the stock, and so that just to boost their income earning capacity, I suppose.
Yeah, cool. And that sort of vests over time, obviously. That just continues to build as longer they hang around, the more equity they end up with.
Yeah, that's right. And we'll have 2 or 3 board meetings a year, just so that both parties know where they stand and what the overall goal is, and whether we help them into the property that they're on, or give them the equity to get out on the open market and purchase their own property. That's yet to be decided. But as long as both parties know where they sit and that there's confidence between them that the farm is being maintained, and that the goal of getting onto their own farm is still on the table. It's not a way to trap someone in for the next 20 years. It's got to be, there's got to be an end goal, hasn't there? And that's always been the case. And you wouldn't go into this if you weren't in that situation.
Yeah, exactly. Right, we'll talk sheep breeding. That's what most people are listening for generally. Obviously, your organic status means that you'd be pretty focused on breeding a sheep that didn't need too many interventions. Obviously, Wormfect Gold, and for those outside of New Zealand, that's a group of breeders who have all go through a detailed protocol to make sure they do all the things necessary to breed for sheep's resistance to worms. And then obviously part of that, and along with the same outcome, I suppose, DAG is another thing that needs to be selected for independently of that. And so there are a couple of passions of yours. Yeah,
no, for sure. And it's probably the reason we got into organics, because we'd already been selecting for worm resistance 10 years before we pushed the button on organics. So we had those stock that could perform on a limited drench program. And part of our organic standards, we're allowed 1 chemical drench, and we use that wisely. It's generally at or around weaning. The heavier a lamb is, the better it can handle a parasite challenge. So lambs that can perform without regular drenching and staying clean, that's That's a really important part, and probably the trifecta for that is resilience as well. Because if you've got an animal that can do that over a long period, that's even better.
Right. Talk us through your journey, and sort of, it's kind of nice to look back now and you've got sheep that can do all that. But I guess early days, some of the things that you did, maybe some of the things that failed and some of the things that you succeeded as you sort of went into that journey.
Well, one of the key things we did early on is that we screened all our commercial ewe lambs and put them under a challenge, tagged them, and feed them individually. We're doing up to 2,500 lambs a year for 2 or 3 years. So we got a population. We identified those ones that are the most resistant, which gave us that population right from the start and the scale to actually make some progress. The frustrating thing was on the stud side, because dealing with smaller numbers, getting those animals that had the resistance but also the performance, that was quite tough at the start. And I've talked to a lot of breeders who got to that stage where they're about ready to give up, and it was the same for us. That next year could be the year that you break it and you get those animals with both. And that's generally what's happened. We were lucky we had one sire that had reasonable performance and good resistance. So that got us up and running, and it's just building on that. But that, we were the third stud in New Zealand to start selecting for worm resistance. So we're getting up towards 40 years of that, and it's a compounding thing. It's like interest; it doesn't let you down. And the more you focus on that, the better. One of the things, the learnings that we did learn, though, was that resistant animals, you need to keep the minerals up to them. There's got to be a good balance there. They've got a highly developed immune system, but if you haven't got those trace elements there, especially, they'll start and mine their own performance just to keep going. It's an immune system that they can't shut off. And probably the second thing that we really learned in those early days was that you've got to keep your resistant animals, the ones that you're getting some resistant genetics into, separate from your susceptible ones, because a real lesson we learned early on was that a couple of lambs that were really, really struggling, and I immediately thought, there are a couple of susceptible ram lambs. But when I looked at their records, they were some of our most resistant. And what they were actually doing, they were cleaning up their own issues, but they're also cleaning up the whole flock's parasite challenge. So they were getting overloaded and looking horrible. As soon as you put them by themselves or with their lambs that were selected for resistance, those issues disappeared. So I think that was a trap early on that we also learned.
I think that's a really important thing for people to really, I guess, let that soak in a bit, that because these animals have a highly tuned immune system, as you said, they're obviously geared up to fight worms, and if they're in a mob that's not geared up to fight worms, they just keep spitting out larvae or spitting out eggs that turn to larvae, and then those resistant ones are fighting those larvae, and so their performance suffers. So we often hear, we bought some of those worm-resistant sheep and they didn't perform, but if you had to put a hot wire between the two groups, then they would have performed and they would have controlled their worms. And it's I think it's a really important trap. Was there a point when, I know it, we're just shifting a normal distribution to a better place, but was there a kind of point where you felt that the mob was now good enough that it started thriving, or is that just a gradual sort of process that there's always going to be a tail? And
yeah, I think whatever your resistance status is, there's always going to be a tail. There's always going to be that bell curve.
Yeah.
Probably that second generation. So when you that second generation that have already got some resistant genes in them, that's when you make your biggest miles. Getting those genes into your flock, you've got to actually get over that halfway, so that you've got more resistant than susceptible. That's when you start to make progress, and that's generally that once you've done one generation of resistant genes, I would think.
Yeah. Thinking back 40 years, I assume you're like most of us who grew up knowing that worms and dags are related in a mob sense, but I guess you would have got surprised like most people when you started selecting for lower worm head count, you didn't get rid of dags.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because we actually got into this whole journey through dag school, because as a young fella, letting those 10% of ewes down the laneway that were clean and having to turn around and dag the 90% that weren't.
Yeah.
I asked this question. It was a bit of a God moment for me. How come those ones are staying clean? And there was a local vet that I talked to, and I said, look, I want to select on dag score. And he said, no, you actually want to select for resistance, because it wasn't on my radar at all in those days. Yeah. No one was doing it. Yeah. But so we did some feck samples that year, and the next year we started a large scale feck sampling of our ewe lambs. And you're right, there isn't a strong correlation between worm or resistance and dag score, but you've got individuals that at both ends of the curve that have both those traits. The biggest issue is that people are making that mental association between dags and they need a drench, and that's patently not correct in a lot of cases. What we do see is we see a lot of flocks where every animal needs dagged because they're all daggy, but you can't make that association with the drench status of those animals, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think various people have done various things, gone chasing worm resistant or chasing dag, and found that, but then just to add in whichever one they weren't doing additionally, so that you get the outcome you want, which is an animal that fights the worms as well as stays clean, which, as you've said, there's plenty of those animals out there on the scattergram. You just got to find them, and you can't find them unless you measure all the bits. But how, I guess, if we land ourselves on your farm today and try and find your drench gun, how often is it? You said you wet once at weaning. Is that kind of that sort of it these days, or?
Pretty much. Look, in the early days, we would delay that one chemical drench that we're allowed into probably late February or sometime in February, early March. But we've found that giving a drench early, and they're not too early, but around that weaning time or 3 weeks before weaning, when they're getting the maximum growth rate on mum, the more lambs that we can get above that 26K, the better. They get to 26 at weaning or above, or hopefully 30Ks. They've got a really good chance of, with their resistant genes, overcoming any challenge over the season. And our challenge is a real challenge, because we're summer wet. We don't get the sun as much sun as Central Otago, so we get plenty of good parasite growing days over that summer autumn period, and but they get a real challenge. So we're not getting an organic premium for our lamb, so we are giving our lambs a couple of drenches, because that's not disturbing our organic status. The drenches still work. We've got all 4 families that we can still use, but we still don't need to over drench them. We still test before we drench.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And so obviously, adult sheep don't see any intervention at all. Is there? I mean, we get wormy seasons and not wormy seasons. I guess down there's probably 365 days a year where eggs probably happily hatch, do they? Is there any, do you actually ever get a worm break? Or maybe cold enough in the snow, I suppose. But.
Look, once we get animals through to May, generally that becomes less of an issue. The issue is we want to get a lamb away within 6 months.
Yeah.
And it's got to grow, and it's also got to fight parasites. And, for us, we're selecting for growth and all the meat and everything else. It's maternal traits that we're selecting for, plus the worm resistance and dag score. So we're past that stage. Like when we started organic farming, we were pretty excited when we got a 14k lamb.
Yeah.
And now we can get 18 kilogram lambs organically, and a drench can add half a k to a k of carcass weight. So that, there's still potential there. But as our genetics improve, that ceiling's just going to keep rising.
Is that 26 kilo number? That's a sort of magic number you've seen. That's when the immune system's, obviously all lambs are born that without immunity, they get a bit from mum, but then need to develop it as they get exposed to different stuff. Is that sort of when they're big enough to kind of the immune system's up and going?
Seems to be. You've got individuals that are smaller than that are cracking lambs.
Yeah.
But we will generally, when we have a weigh up, those guys will drench, and if there's a mob that aren't going to make it, it'll be them. So what we'll generally do is give them a chance, and if they're not, they'll get a second drench and they'll move out of the organic team, and we'll sell them conventionally.
Yeah.
And the drench will pick them up, but there's just so many things in lamb growth, isn't there? It's the season, minerals, a whole shebang of things that, it's very hard to pinpoint one, but that's the cutoff weight that we work on.
Yeah. I'm interested in your minerals. I'll make the assumption that it's dependent on the farm as to which minerals they need, but you've seen that these you need to. So what minerals, I guess, are you supplying to support those immune animals?
Look, the key ones for us are the cobalt and selenium, but not far behind are copper and zinc.
Right.
So, and the copper's an interesting one, isn't it? Because we associate copper with cattle, but copper's also a big immune, as is zinc, an immune driver in sheep, and it helps them to overcome parasites. So the copper levels are good in sheep, and we always, when we're doing liver tests, we'll do cobalt, selenium, and copper, and just to make sure that those levels are high. So, and we're also using a lot of seaweed and things from the sea, because then you get the perfect balance of all those things too.
Yeah.
So that's, as an organic farmer, my focus is on the soil and the soil microbial life, your soil microbe.
Yeah.
And we get that right, the rest of it seems to fit into place pretty well.
So that's where you're delivering minerals through? It's through soil nutrition, not direct to the animal, or a bit of both?
Ideally, it's through the soil.
Yeah.
But if we need to correct, yes, we'll intervene with the lambs. And, that may be a cobalt selenium injection. But generally, if you start off with good levels, that season's pretty bulletproof for those things.
Yeah, copper's an interesting one, because we know that you give them too much and it'll kill them. And so it's something that people avoid handling sheep. But this is the second conversation I've had within 2 weeks about exactly the same thing. So, it's obviously important.
Yeah, on that copper one, we had our own mineral mix, and we're putting 3 times the amount, the vet's recommended amount of copper in that, with no issues. And interestingly, that company now won't do any mineral mixes, because obviously someone has overdosed with something.
Yeah.
And now the gun shy and everyone misses out. So
yeah, right. Yeah. Fair enough. What other things you focus on is longevity? Obviously, getting a young sheep through to its first reproductive event's an expensive thing to do on a farm. So if they can hang around, once you do get them there, if they hang around longer, the better they go. What's your protocol to I guess encourage longevity, other than just keeping them hanging around? But
yeah, it's probably both from a flock and a stud point of view. We're identifying those ewes that are structurally sound, still performing at a high level, and we don't kill them on their birthday sort of thing. If they're good enough, that they stick around. And we've got ewes that are easily 2 years with 7 lemmings. Our top ram, who's got a maternal worth of about just under 5,500, he's looking at his 9th mating this year. So, as you said, there's a hell of a cost in the depreciation rate if you use a high index ram and you only use them once. because he didn't perform. All those figures didn't sort of come out in your own stock. So it's those guys, you can guarantee their performance and the fact that they can stay around for that amount of years. If we could get an extra year out of all our ewes, well, it just cuts your depreciation rate of ewe hoggets, ewe lambs, doesn't it? It's efficiency, it's all those things. But we really need a longevity score, BV, because that would really, I think that would be really a powerful tool for farmers, especially selecting from animals that have been around for that long and still performing.
Yeah, no, I really like that. I think that IGS, American System, has stability in cattle, which I think is really good. That's female progeny that is still calving at 6-year-old in the herd. I think something like that would be quite cool in the cattle game. We probably didn't go into any detail about which breed you're playing with. It's probably no real breed, but I think terminals and maternals that Avalon working on.
Yeah, we are. Look, we've bred up our own sheep, which we call the Ultimate, which is high performance, low input maternal breed. Basically, we're after a sheep you don't have to drench, dag, dip, or dock. So it's still got a fleece. It's got a short beard tail, a clean ass, low dag score, and a bare belly. And because all the value in a fleece is on the fleece, it's not around the belly or the arse end, and so that's been really important for us. And when you add on the dag score, the worm resistance, resilience, we do a bit of FE, testing for FE. We've got a fairly low input animal there, and it's it does really well. We send rams all around New Zealand, and they seem to perform pretty well. So that's exciting. We have played around with we're trying to get a fine fleece on our Ultimates. That's not as easy as it sounds. We know that, and not probably telling us any of your audience anything new there. Look, it is challenging. It's just to get some performance. It's easier to get the fleece, but just to get that growth and that meat and the dag score, especially some of the 3/4 breeds that we've used, they've got really good resistance, quite surprising. But the dag score is certainly not there, and the meat and the growth. So we're still working on that, and we're actually going back to rams, which we started with in the early days. Looking back, they weren't the ones with the glossy brochures, but they've actually done the best in our wet environment.
Interesting. The bare breech, was that something that came naturally as you went for dag score, or that was something you just added on additionally? When we started, back in 2007, we looked right around New Zealand, and we took rams that had some of those traits and combined them together. A lot of them were from our parent base, but also the Texel. Got a lot out of the Texel. Daniel Wheeler had some very good fins with the bareness, the peeling tails, that sort of thing. They're right around the country, and no animal had them all. The breech is something that develops, and it's pretty, a bare breech with a short peeling tail. It's pretty, that spins my wheels. Because it cuts all that work out, doesn't it? Yeah. And that's where the work in the sheep is, in that arse end. Yeah. And that's, there's a lot of people going into shedding sheep, but if we'd done the work right with our maternals and got those traits into our maternals, I don't think you would have seen that. That drive to drop the maternal and go into the shedding sheep. Yeah. So, Allan, you're on the low input. Well, I assume you're on the committee. Yeah, I can almost guarantee that. But yeah, obviously, low input trial was run, is now wrapped up, I think. But been there at Orari Gorge, been a range of not basically, it is a progeny test but I guess a progeny test with a difference where all of the health traits were really intensely studied, and animals were run in a way to allow those animals that could thrive under challenge to come to the fore, whereas often these things, animals are managed kind of too well for those animals to really show their skills. But yeah, so talk us through a bit about that and what that sort of found, or what you learnt from it.
Look, at the whole low input trial came through a discussion at a genetics conference, and from that it progressed to getting the funding and selling the idea to beef and lamb. And it was run at Arari, I think, for 5 years. So we had 5 different cohorts of lambs produced from that, and it was such a powerful thing because putting sheep on a level playing field where there was a wee bit of pressure, it really made a lot of sense. It was really hard to get it through the animal ethics and all the rest. You'd think, on a normal farm you have animals dying, being born and dying sort of thing, but it seemed to be incredibly hard to get over that line. But we got there, and the results spoke for themselves, that some of the sires that hadn't been selected for resistance and DAG score proved themselves, and the ones that had a history of selection for those traits generally did pretty well. But it's a bell curve too. But it was very powerful, the results we got over the 5 years. Unfortunately, that trial is finished, and personally, I'm quite disappointed because I think we need to identify sheep that aren't dependent on drench for their performance, and I think the New Zealand sheep industry is basically drench dependent, and especially with drench resistance, around 40% for your triples, we desperately need to identify those animals that can actually do the job without regular drenching. That trial did identify those things, but it's now finished. It's very expensive to do those things. But if ever you're going to do a progeny trial, wouldn't you be doing one limiting some of those chemical inputs just to identify those animals that got something special, those traits? Yeah,
it's always quite counterintuitive running those sort of things. Just sort of do what everyone else does. You get them up, get them looking good, then you give them either worms and, or give them, in our case, worms and foot rot, and see what happens. But yeah, obviously under careful control. But yeah, that's the unfortunate or fortunate, whichever way you look at it. The only way we can express these disease traits is that they need to be exposed to some of these diseases. And as you say, there's outside of these trial environments, there's lots of different conditions out there, and sheep are walking around in worms and getting daggy and all the rest of it every day. It's just that we need to study it so we can find out which genetics can thrive. And really powerful stuff. And I guess one of the things that we'll have done is set up some really good linkage between the flocks, so that or connectedness in Kiwi terms, so that at least the stuff that is going on at home is properly connected. So therefore, the breeding values are still a good way across those flocks to select those animals, superior animals.
Yeah, no, true enough. But look, I think that most of the New Zealand sheep industry is drench dependent, and will continue to be so. And the marketing brochures don't tell the full story about the how an animal can handle those things. And if you're going down the drench resistance track, it's actually too late to get those. Well, it's never too late, but you've missed the opportunity getting those worm-resistant genetics into your flock. And that's the best time was yesterday or 5 years ago, wasn't it? Yes. It's not today.
It's our planted tree thing, isn't it? When the best time was 40 years ago, next best time is today. Yep.
Correct.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah, no, awesome stuff. So, yeah, the short tail area is something that's I've always been interested in, probably since meeting Scobie, I suppose. Is that, I don't know what we've sort of found, it's a bit of a challenge to get going when you get started, but it does, like all things that gains momentum, once you get a few sires that I think you said before, you're lucky to get a good sire and your worm resistance and growth coming together. And I think all of our breeding programs end up getting lucky with the odd sire that does a bit of both, and that's how you get moving. Has it been once you got moving, was it pretty an easy trait to introduce?
Yes, it is. Look, it's heritability-wise, it's about 0.7 or 0.8. So it's as good as it gets. And so it's if you want to get into it, the best way is to get some of that genetics in. And basically your tail length's going to end up halfway between your dam and your sire. So you can make rapid progress. The tail, the short tail is good, but you've got to have the dag score with it, because a short daggy tail's not all that special to look at either. And we haven't tailed or docked any lamb for the last 4 years, so they're all going over the conveyor with their tails. So obviously you wouldn't be doing that if it wasn't working. So dag score plus tail length, really important. For us, anything from the hock and shorter is okay. And probably the issue we have in our industry is that our main maternal breeds have got very long tails. Your Romney, your Coopworth, Perrendale. And interestingly, the Wiltshire, very long tail. So a lot of these sheep have got long tails, and if we can get from the hock and shorter and a clean and a peeling tail, which is also a trade in itself, you're pretty much bulletproof. And why would you dock a tail that was short and it wasn't going to get dags on it? I think for me, seeing a sheep that's been docked is strange for most people when they come here and they see all the long tails. I think it used to be the sign of a piss poor tailing muster when you saw these long tailers.
Yeah. It's amazing how quickly you get used to it, though. Like we've worked with a few flocks that don't tail and are selecting for short tails, and it just becomes it's amazing how quickly you just like that looks normal, and you kind of move on, and that kind of obviously is. That's what they evolved with. Do you find that once you get above the hock, they get full control of that tail, so they're lifting it up, and so that kind of why it's a magic spot. Longer than that, it sort of dangles and gets dags on the end of it and whatever. But once they get it, they got full control.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it for sure, and also bearings too, because they've got that muscle control on their tail. We see less bearings through that as well. Yeah. So it's nature as God provided, wasn't it? They had tails. They've always had tails, and all we've done is make it longer and more woolly, and we pay the price for that. So part of my challenge is to get a short peeling tail on a fine wool sheep. Yeah. That would be a game changer in the fine wool industry.
Yeah, there's a couple of programs working on it. So, but and it certainly is a challenge. But the one thing that us genetic tragics know for sure is that everything's possible. It just takes time, effort, and money. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Which none of us are patient, of course.
No, that's one of the challenges. Yeah. Excellent, Allan. Thanks very much for your time. All the best down there in the south. Great to see all of those things coming together in one sheep and enabling. I think all of those traits coming together is what we need as a sheep industry to bring it. So we're reducing our labour and keeping people farming sheep.
Dead right. Yeah, look, we've got a lot of farms around here that are being sold and planted out in trees. So, we've got to make it more achievable and profitable. This is probably the best farming year price-wise that we've ever had, but can't guarantee it, can you? And there's a whole lot of, we might even get 2 or 3 in a row. That would be even better, but we've got to have sheep that can compete on labour as much as profitability. There's got to be, we've got to become more efficient, and those sheep are out there, that's for sure. But it's if you've got to do the dagging yourself, you'd probably make different decisions than you do when you get someone else to dag them for you.
Yeah, I think that was one of the great things of COVID. People did their own crutching, which got them focused on dag score pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Allan.
You're welcome, Ferg.
Thanks for listening, and thanks again to our 3 fantastic sponsors. Heinegger, who are proud world leaders in the manufacturing and supply of professional sheep shearing and clipping equipment. Allflex Livestock Intelligence, part of MSD Animal Health, offer extensive livestock product portfolio focused on animal health management, all backed up by exceptional service. ProWay Livestock Equipment offer turnkey solutions from design through to professional installation and specialise in facilities that are tailored to your specific operation for all livestock species. We thank these three great companies for their ongoing support of the Head Shepherd podcast.